So today I want to talk high volume oil pumps. It's the weekend and a lot of times I pop onto some automotive forums and once in a while I see some, I don't know, incorrect stuff said about high volume oil pumps, and it's really become gospel, it seems like, over time, and it's just not correct. So I want to make a little video here of kind of my knowledge, especially from my experiences of running high volume oil pumps and some of the logistics that go along with those. Now, the first thing I want to address with the high volume oil pump is the name in and of itself. So it's a high volume oil pump. That means it moves more oil than a standard pump. They're about 20% more or so, give or take. So basic fluid dynamics tells us that with everything equal, the oiling journals and orifices the same size, trying to move more through them, we're going to have higher pressures if we're moving more volume. So that's the first thing we want to understand, which you have too much pressure, you can have bearing issues, but usually you're not getting into that too much. So with higher pressures, you have more resistance on your oil pump, and with these Fords, they have a smaller distributor gear, which the oil pump is driven off of the oil pump shaft, which plugs into the bottom of the distributor. And with those gears and that shaft being smaller on the Ford, if you get into those higher pressures, you can really tear up your cam gear. And if you don't have a stronger, pump shaft, you can twist that. And I've worked on other people's engines where they've actually had these issues. Now, the reason I get away with a high volume oil pump in my Ford is I have solid lifters and the orifices are drilled a little bit larger. So it's for more high RPM stuff. So naturally, with those larger orifices, I would have lower pressure than what a normal hydraulic lifter engine would have. So with my high volume pump, I idle at about 40-45 pounds, where had I had hydraulic lifters, I'd probably be up in the 50s, or could even be to 60s. So that's bad. You want to stay away from that, and that's why generally with the small block Ford, I advocate against the high volume oil pump unless you have solid lifters. Just that smaller gear, it's just smaller than the Chevrolet. You Ford guys, you just got to deal with it. It's smaller, you're just gonna wear that stuff out unless you have a sacrificial gear, which it really is a pain in the butt to change cam gears, or not cam gears, the gear on the distributor. And they have composite gears, bronze gears, stuff that has a sacrificial material that will wear out instead of wearing your cam out. So you can imagine, you wear your cam out, all that particulate rains down all over your engine. It's a mess. If you want to do it right, you got to pull it all apart, and it's just something you don't want to get into. So for the Ford guys, I would say that you're completely fine with the stock oil pump. Again, solid lifters, you can get away with it. I have, at least for 7-8 years or so. Now the Chevrolet has a bigger distributor gear and drive gear on the cam and a larger oil pump shaft, so you can run a high volume oil pump on a Chevrolet. Now, is it necessary on the street? Not really. Street applications, it's not really important. So you really don't need a high volume oil pump on the street whatsoever, especially if you have normal journal clearances. So but with a Chevrolet, you can get away with it. And the last thing I want to address is people always are talking about how it'll run your pan dry. So when I had this engine in the Galaxy, I had a 7-core oil pan because I was afraid of this. But with this truck, when I pulled the engine out and had to put it in this truck, obviously you can see I really had to slap some stuff together. Amazingly, it works. But anyway, I got a 5-quart pan on here just to take a look at it. It's nothing special. It's a stock Ford pan, and it's totally held together. And I do some pretty good RPM pulls there where I'm up above 4,500 for at least a good minute or two. And I'm not losing oil pressure or anything. And when I come back to an idle, I still have the same oil pressure, you know, I haven't worn my engine down whatsoever. So, you know, that's just kind of foolish. And honestly, to be able to take 5 quarts and pump it up here where you don't have enough in the bottom of your pan is just absurd. You know, if you think through that, it's completely absurd. I've never had any issues with that, you know, at least from my experience and running it on the street. So anyway, that's just kind of my overview of high volume oil pumps. You really don't need them on the street if all your bearing clearances are correct, you have a good strong engine. There's no reason you'd ever need this. So the only reason I have one in here is the solid lifters. They're made for more high RPM stuff and more oil flow to the rockers, so they have larger oiling orifices. And I can run a high volume oil pump because my oil pressure is about in the same place that a stock oil pump would be, standard flow oil pump with hydraulic lifters. So anyway, that's just my take on it. So think what you will, listen to what you will on the internet, but you know, that's where I'm coming from with it. You don't need it. You can get away with it in the Chevrolet, the Ford, unless you're running solid lifters. You know, you really don't need it. If your engine's good and tight and built correctly, for the street, you know, you have street bearing clearances, there's no reason that you would ever need one. So anyway, there you go. My take on high volume oil pumps.